Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first of 3 open dialogue webinars about the National Ombudsman Reporting System, otherwise known as NORS. These webinars are specifically for those of you in the field who provide direct Ombudsman program services, but I'm glad to know that we have several state ombudsmen in attendance as well. I'm Amity Overall-Labe with NORC, and our speakers today are Louise Ryan, Ombudsman Program Specialist with the Administration on Aging, Administration for Community Living, Maria Green, a NORC consultant, and myself. Louise is en route to a conference to attend.
I am here.
Oh, good. Okay, I was just going to say she may not be here.
Dialing in.
Okay, good. I can hear you. So, so I'll get through these slides and I'll turn it over to you. Thanks, Louise. As you may have seen in the email that went out about registration for this webinar series, we are trying a new webinar format, which we're calling an open dialogue. Today's discussion is specifically about case, complaint, complainant, and information assistance from the Part 1 training materials. We're only going to present a few slides to go over the basics, and then the majority of the time is open for you to ask questions. You may ask questions by using the Q&A feature on your screen because, as you've noticed, attendees are muted. You can think about this as a drop-by kind of social event where you're not obligated to stay the whole time. You can ask your question and stay on to listen to others, or you can drop off the call, whatever works for you. We will be recording the session, and it will be available on the NORC website, assuming full disclosure that everything goes well with the recording. Since this is a new format, we hope to have an engaging dialogue, but if we have a lot of dead air that needs to be edited out, then bear with us when it comes to the recording, but we will work on that. Next slide, Katie. Thank you. So if this is your first time to a Zoom webinar, I just wanted to give you a little reminder about what to do if you do have a question. If you take your mouse and scroll to the bottom of your screen, you should have a little black bar like the top of this slide, and one has Q&A icon. So we'd prefer that you put your questions in the Q&A icon because it's a little easier for us to keep track of them. However, you can use the chat feature too if that's what works better for you. Next slide, please. So for today's agenda, we will include a few remarks from Louise from ACL, a brief overview of the Part 1 elements, again, case, complaint, complainant, and information and assistance, have time for discussion, and then a few slides with reminders about available resources. So next slide. And with that, I'd like to welcome Louise Ryan. As you heard, we're glad to have her on the line to share some greetings and reminders about the importance of NORS data collection.
Thank you, Amity, and thank you, everyone, for being on the call today and for your really being thoughtful and wanting to do right by your documentation. I really appreciate that. So I just wanted to say a few things. One is just to remind you all that if you've been with the program for a while and collecting your NORS data, coding your cases, complaints, etc., that process really hasn't changed in the grand scheme of things. So just to, practices that you have should continue to work. Obviously you're learning some new codes and things like that, but just want to really remind you that the process is basically the same. And if you've not been one to kind of routinely get your documentation into your software program, I would say that really becomes critical, because the better you can keep up with that, the better your state's data will be, because we are, again, moving to a situation and a system where the state ombudsman can't just get your numbers and type them in anymore. They have to have the actual file, the case complaint file. So that's a big change. So I just really want to encourage that you develop routine time, to enter your cases and complaints and other activities. The other thing I wanted to mention and just let you know in case you weren't aware is that the NORS data tables, tables 1, 2, and 3, you will see in the corner, it should be in the upper right-hand corner, there's an OMB number. OMB means Office of Management and Budget. And that means that when the federal government wants information from 9 or more individuals or entities, they have to get approval from the Office of Management and Budget. So we go through a process of, and we went through a process of, developing the codes with a lot of input from state ombudsman and local ombudsman. We had a committee and all of that. So it was a very long and painstaking process. And then there's opportunity for the public to comment. So as part of the OMB approval, it went out for 60-day comment period and a 30-day comment period. And even with all that, we find how we could have done it better. And so if you see things, and I know a couple people have raised a couple of points where, our language could be more clear. If you see things like that, flag it. You are welcome to email me or the Resource Center and say, hey, I think, it could be better explained this way. And we'll save it because come 2021, we have to get another approval for our data collection. And so 2021 really isn't all that far away. So I see this as a great opportunity with this kind of major revision of the codes to say, oh, how could we make it better? So send those in. I'm saving them. And again, we will go through a process, an informal process with the State Ombudsman Association and the Local Ombudsman Association, and then the formal 60 and 30-day process to get input. So, there's always room for improvement. So, but just know that the tables as they are now are set in stone until 2021, so they cannot be changed. So, and we've added with the Resource Center, I think you have seen that we've added extra guidance and examples to help you if there was any kind of something that wasn't clear. So again, I want to thank you for participating in today's call and look forward to your questions. I'll be able to stay on and listen and mute for a few minutes, and then I will just quietly sign off. So thank you all.
Thanks, Louise. Okay, so next we have Maria. I'd like to turn it over to her.
Good
you can
afternoon,
keep
everyone.
it on this slide. Thank you.
Okay. So on this slide, what you see, and you've seen this numerous times, but just as a reminder, that today we're going to talk about the part that pertains to the National Ombudsman Reporting System Training Part 1. So there's the case, complaint, complainant, and information and assistance. There's also a quiz and the quiz answer sheet. Remember, we did the webinars back in the summer and the fall where we went through these. And also they were emailed to you, and you can use those as a reference today when you have questions to ask. We'll also be referring back to them. And if it's helpful to you, these training materials are also available in black and white on the NORC website. And also the tables, the NORS tables from ACL. And I know we made a few changes to trainings part 2 and 3, but there were no edits or changes to this part 1. Next slide, Katie. So, let me see. Yeah, okay, we're looking. I had told Amity when we started ahead that we've got storms here, so my computer is not happy with all the storms. But this is the snapshot of the basic principles, and each part of the revised NORS training includes a basic principles resource that gives you some explanations and reminders. We just wanted to tell you about those because those will be helpful. Next slide. And so a case is comprised of a complainant, one or more complaints, the documentation of a perpetrator for cases involving abuse, gross neglect, and exploitation. Then there's a setting, a verification, a resolution, and information regarding any referrals to another agency. Next slide. So these are kind of the guidelines. They tell you, when they were developing software that there has to be rules, and many of you are adjusting to changes probably to your state's data collection system. But one of the rules is that each case must have at least one complaint. And a complaint is an expression of dissatisfaction or concern brought to or initiated by the Ombudsman Program, which requires Ombudsman Program investigation and resolution on behalf of one or more residents of the facility. Next slide. This is the definition of the complainant. That's the individual who requests Ombudsman Program complaint investigation service regarding one or more complaints made by or on behalf of the residents. And in the revised NORS, it does provide a definition for you there. You can see it on the screen. It's an individual chosen by the resident to act on behalf of the resident in order to support the resident in decision-making, accessing medical, social, or other personal information of the resident, managing their financial matters, or receiving notifications. It could be a person authorized by state or federal law, such as the power of attorney or representative payee or any other types of fiduciaries. It varies what they're called in your state. It could be a legal representative, or it could be a court-appointed guardian that acts as a conservator of the resident. A friend is a non-relative with a personal relationship with the resident as identified by the resident or the complainant. And the family is a spouse, sibling, or other relative as identified by the resident. Okay, next slide. So we always want to make sure that we're clear about what is a complaint and what is an information and assistance. It used to be called information assistance now. Well, no. It used to be called consultation. It's now called information and assistance. But the activity defined is very similar. The revised NORS no longer ask about the topics for information and assistance. However, your state may still want you to document the topics of request for assistance. The definition is that it's the provision of information to an individual or facility and staff about issues impacting residents. So it could be anything from their rights to care issues or their services, and or sharing of information about screening services without opening a case and working to resolve a complaint. Next slide.
Hi, this is Amity. We may have lost Maria, so I'm going to go ahead and pick up from here and see if she rejoins after the storm. So let's see, where are we? Information and assistance, as a reminder, and I believe she already mentioned, can be provided through a variety of ways. It's not limited to the telephone. It could be in person or also responding to an email or sometimes even snail mail. The really important thing to remember, because we've already received questions about this, it does not involve investigating or working towards resolving a complaint. You're simply providing information and assistance and resources to help empower either the resident or someone else to solve the problem on their own. And you did not seek consent to investigate a complaint. Also, an important note, directing a person to contact another agency for help does not constitute a case. So if, someone reaches out to you for a service that the Ombudsman Program doesn't provide, and you refer that out, that doesn't count as a case because you didn't actually do any investigation. You're just providing information. Next slide, please, Katie. So you have probably seen this as well as part of our training, and this is the table, one of the 3 tables that Louise was mentioning earlier in her remarks. This is Table 1, Parts A, B, and C, Case and Complaint Codes, Values, and Definitions. So this is the table that you refer to often through the Part 1 training materials. And it has definitions for what is a case, what is a complaint, a complainant, disposition, resolution codes, and so on. Next slide, please. As far as just some reminders of highlights, especially those that are new in the revised NORS, which was effective earlier this month, Table 1 explains that cases must have the following components that are on your screen. As Louise mentioned, reporting a lot of this information is not new to you. This is information you've already reported and just as part of normal ombudsman work. In reporting a case, programs have to identify the complainant, complaint code, type of facility, setting, verification, and resolution for complaints. In red font, those are the changes to the revised NORS that started earlier this month. Programs now have to enter a code for the perpetrator, or at least the suspected perpetrator, as reported to you and investigated, of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, meaning coding whether it was facility staff, another resident, a family member, or resident representative, friend, or another individual that's alleged to have caused the abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Also new is the fact that referring a complaint to another agency is no longer considered a disposition code. As you may remember, it used to be a referral out to, say, APS or the state survey agency used to be a disposition code. However, now programs will enter a code for what type of agency the complaint was referred to as a step in the process towards resolving the complaint. And that is it for just kind of our review of the high points of Part 1. As you know, we already provided some pretty in-depth training in the webinar series earlier this year, and those materials and recordings are available on the website. But we did want to touch base on some of the main points before we move into the dialogue. So next slide, Katie. Thank you. As I mentioned, this is a new format, and so we're just going to see how it goes today. It may be that, there's a little dead air as folks think about their questions and enter them. There may be a little dead air while we make sure that we're giving the proper response. So just bear with us as we move through this. I think it'll be really helpful to everyone involved. And as just a reminder, please keep the discussion focused on case, complaint, complainant, and information and assistance. That is our focus today. We will cover the other parts in upcoming open dialogues in November and December. Next slide, please. So go ahead and type your question into the question and answer box by clicking that icon I showed you earlier, or put that in the chat box. I see that we have, oh good. Hi Maria. Glad you're back on. Sorry about that.
Thank you for jumping in.
Yeah, no problem. Who knows? Mine may go out next, so we'll see. Okay, so while y'all are thinking about some questions to enter into, like I said, either the chat box or the Q&A, I do want to share some questions that we had come in by email before the webinar started today, because it may be a question that you have as well. One question was, does there have to be an investigation for a complaint to be made into a case or for a complaint to be coded? Yes. As a reminder, a complaint is an expression of dissatisfaction or a concern brought to or initiated by the Ombudsman Program, which requires Ombudsman Program investigation and resolution. So yes, there has to be an investigation for it to be considered a complaint. And then you have to have a complaint in order for there to be a case. If you have your quiz in front of you, actually, let me see. Bear with me here. I'm going to try to share my screen, Katie, so just give me 1 second. I'd like to go to the quiz. There we go, quiz answer sheet. Can you see the quiz as it's whizzing by? Okay, great. Okay, so one question we received was about question number 12 on the Part 1 quiz. The question was, you may remember this, it was kind of a lengthy quiz question, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but basically, resident, Miss Lee's daughter called you to complain about her mother's bath and wanting more baths. When you go and visit Miss Lee as the ombudsman, you stop by and see another resident, and then you're going down a hallway and you observe that there's dirty laundry on the floor in the hall and that the hall is really dark because several lights are not working. So the question was, and the answer to how many cases were there and how many complaints was that there are 3 cases with 3 separate complainants. So Mrs. Lee's daughter for the first complaint, you as the ombudsman for 2 complaints, which was the dirty laundry being on the ground and then the lights being out. So those were 2 complaints. And then the third complaint or case would be Mrs. James as the complainant, and then Mrs. James had 3 complaints. So the question from the attendee was, why aren't there 2 cases as opposed to 1 case with 2 complaints? So basically asking the ombudsman, instead of having the ombudsman as a complainant for 1 case with 2 complaints, that there should be 2 separate cases, 1 case basically for each complaint. And the attendee was saying that tracking kind of these larger systemic issues within a facility that impacts more than 1 resident is difficult when there's more than 1 complaint within a case. So our response is that it's still 1 case with 2 complaints with the complainant as the ombudsman program, because the ombudsman observed those 2 issues. Those issues impact more than 1 resident. And even though it could be, I see the point, it could be challenging to deal with 2 complaints that are kind of bigger issue like that impacts a lot of people. Even if you resolve 1 complaint faster, maybe the dirty laundry is picked up and taken care of faster than addressing the broken lights or non-working lights, then you would just keep the case open until both complaints within that case are closed. So it still would be 1 case with 2 complaints with the complainant as the ombudsman. Another question we received was there, according to the basic principles, only 1 complainant per case, but what if, for example, there are 3 family members that call you separately and they make the same complaint? Is that 3 cases? It seems a little overdone to have 3 cases. And yes, the attendee that emailed this, you're right, that would be too much to have 3 cases. In this situation, since the 3 family members that contacted you have the same complaint but just reached out to you separately, you would consider the first family member that contacted you the complainant, and you could take additional information from the other family members as part of your investigation, but you would not open 3 cases with the same complaint with 3 separate complainants. Hope that helps.
And Amity,
yes.
If you have it on your screen, will you pull up NORS Table 1, and I believe it's page 2, where it shows information about the data element per complainant? Okay. So where and move your screen down just a little bit so they can see the blue header. There you go, the quantifier. So that tells you that you can have multiple complainants, but as far as it goes for reporting to NORS about this particular case, you need to choose the 1 complainant, even though there were multiple ones. Choose the 1 complainant that you're going to list in the data system. So in that example, I believe it was various family members, so it would be O2, resident representative or family. And just wanted to make that connection back to Table 1 as an additional reference.
Thanks, Maria. That's great. Excellent point. So, and I know, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating what Louise already said, but I just want to be really clear because we've gotten this from several ombudsmen, because y'all are really focused on details, which is great because you caught this issue and brought it to our attention. And as Louise mentioned earlier, the tables, the ACL tables, the one that's on your screen, can't be changed until it expires. However, the issue that the person emailed about and that others have noted is that the definition, let's see, for disposition, here you go. The definition for complaint disposition 03, O2, says withdrawn or no action needed by the resident representative, or complainant. And the person that emailed in was basically saying that's a little confusing because shouldn't it say withdrawn by the resident or no action needed by the ombudsman? Yes, that's the intent, is that it was withdrawn by the resident or the complainant, or there's no action needed not by the resident but by the ombudsman program. So that's certainly the intent. I think y'all get the intent, and we have, as Louise noted, jotted that down as an issue to address in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so I can see the I can see the Q&A question. Oh, go ahead, Maria.
I see one that we can do on a follow-up regarding the scenario with Mrs. Lee, the case that you just referenced.
Yes, please.
So if you want to go back to it, they're saying the question is, the complainant is Mrs. Lee's daughter in that case. And the question is, are we still not resident directed? That's a good question. We are definitely resident directed, but the first person who alerted us to the problem is the one that you identify as the complainant, which is Mrs. Lee's daughter. But as an ombudsman, you're always going to have an investigation with a case, and you're going to go and talk to the resident and see if the resident shares the same concern and take their direction. So in a lot of the Q&A, we start, and I believe we actually write it in the beginning of the training part 1 with the assumption that we have talked with and gotten the resident's permission.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Excellent point, Maria. And yes, all the training materials say that. Assume that you have the resident's permission unless it's noted specifically in the scenario that you don't. So, excellent point. Thank you. While we're looking for the other Q&As and chat messages, I want to try to open up this page. We have developed some NORS FAQs. The first phase of them, there's about 20. So I want to just remind you to visit this page as you have these questions come up when you're documenting your work, because hopefully some of these FAQs will address it if those weren't addressed in the training materials. And just so you know, too, the FAQs are available in a PDF right here, so you can actually download it, and you can use it in training your volunteers and working with your representatives. So, and there was a webinar recording, too, because we did a webinar to review these FAQs and answer any questions about the questions. So, thanks. All right. Let's see. So a question is, sometimes we have several complainants, I believe, with similar complaints, but there might be some differences for each resident. Is it correct to open more than one complaint / more than one case? And Maria, feel free to jump in, but my immediate gut reaction is to say yes. If you have several complainants, so several residents that you're meeting with, and they have somewhat similar complaints, but there are differences, then in order to be resident directed and make sure that you're providing individualized advocacy, then yes, I would open up individual cases with that complaint or complaints for each complainant. Maria, feel free to add or let me know if you see otherwise. Oh, she may have been knocked off again. So she can't disagree with me. But no,
that was on
there
me.
you are.
How about that?
Okay, good.
I was agreeing with you, and to the person who asked the question, I think that's a good strategy. I love when I see that ombudsmen are thinking. And I don't mean to imply that you're not always thinking, but I was talking to a regional ombudsman from Louisiana a week or so ago, and he was very thoughtful about having to figure out, as ombudsmen are really good people to figure out puzzles and solutions, and he had some options for what his answer would be. And I just encourage ombudsmen that when you come across things that you're not sure of, to find another ombudsman in the office that you can talk to, call another ombudsman, call your state ombudsman, and just talk it out, because even amongst ourselves, Amity and I will be back and forth about answering a question and may have a different perspective on it also. Back to you, Amity.
Thanks, Maria. Okay, so another question we received is whether we'll be adding new FAQs in the future. And yes, so similar to how Louise and I mentioned that we have our own internal list about future potential changes based on feedback from you all to the training materials and the tables. we're also keeping an internal list of additional FAQs. So once we have a decent amount of those, we will draft them and share them up on the website. So yeah, please keep checking the website to see if it's updated. We will also send out an email blast to everybody in our listserv once we add additional FAQs, and of course notify the state ombudsman so they can notify you too if you don't receive our emails. Okay. Maria, do you see any chat messages that I'm missing? Oh wait, I see Q&A. Nope, we answered those. Okay.
I don't see anybody. I did have somebody ask I saw one that says, where are the snacks? If we're having a social event, we should have snacks. And I agree. If anybody can figure out how to send chocolate over the internet, that would be great.
Yes, that is a fair question. I'm getting hungry myself. So, okay, well, I'm going to stop sharing because I have a hard time seeing and I'll go back to you, Katie, if you want to put up the slide deck. You can just leave it on the one with the keyboard. That'll work. And just to let you know, too, that in the chat box, to call your attention to that, the PowerPoint slides, Katie included a link to today's slides already. And we will send a follow-up email to everybody with the link to the recording and the slides and the materials for today's webinar. So thank you, Katie, for doing that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show y'all the resources that I was going to review in a couple minutes anyways. And maybe as I'm going through these, additional questions will come in. If we don't receive any additional questions, that is okay. We can always answer questions by email, and as you have them, don't hesitate to reach out to us. So, just to remind you, this is how you can get to the NORS website. Go to our home page, click on support, and go down to NORS. And as you can see, we have all the information for NORS on this page with bullets. These are the 3 ACL tables right here. There are 2 crosswalks that ACL created, one about a NORS overview about the revised NORS, now current NORS, and one that crosswalks between the old complaint codes and the ones that are now effective. You can click here. And this is, we created some cheat sheets, so if you weren't on the FAQ webinar, you may not have seen this. But we did create some cheat sheets to be similar to the format that you may be familiar with in the previous NORS. So it has all the complaint codes and definitions, examples, and reporting tips. It's just not laid out in that table format. And then we also have this one that's just a one-pager with all the codes and complaint code names. So we encourage you, of course, to use the comprehensive tables at first to get familiar with the new codes, but then you can use those cheat sheets moving forward and certainly use those in your training. All of the training materials are here. The FAQ page I showed you earlier is here. And then we have NORS data here, and just so you know, in case you haven't visited this page, it has all the NORS tables and a link to AGID, which we need to change because they just changed the name of this database yesterday. But you can pull data from AGID, or you can look at these tables, and you can do a lot with this information. We do have the 2018 NORS tables, and those will be available on our website here soon. So let me see here. I think we got a couple more questions. So Katie, I'm going to go back to you, or try. If you want to take it back, there we go. Thank you. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Remind me what code to use for stolen or lost property. Lost dentures is the exact complaint. Okay, so that is, thanks for asking that question. That is going to be part of our open dialogue next month, but I can see if I can look that up quickly, or Maria, if you beat me to it, go for it. But I'm going to pull up the tables on my other computer. Okay, so this would be, to answer your question, that would go under code E02 specifically for personal property. You'd use that code for lost personal items such as laundry, dentures, hearing aids, glasses, radios, watches, and so on. So thank you for your question. Okay, so I'm going to move forward. I don't see any other, oh wait, as soon as I said that, let's see. Great question. So the question is, I'm a fairly new ombudsman, and I'm curious about the information that NORS gathers from the states and what all the data is collected is intended to be used for. Great question, and welcome to the Ombudsman program. Glad to have you. So since you are new to the program, you may want to go back, if you haven't already listened to the webinar series that we did earlier this year that reviews all of these materials. There were 5 webinars, part of the webinar series. And the reason I say that is because Louise from ACL that you heard earlier on the call goes into some pretty great detail, especially in the intro webinar, about how the NORS data is used. But to give you some examples, at the federal level, NORS data is often used for budget justification to explain, why funding is needed for the program. It's also used for some systems advocacy at the federal level because ACL in Louise's role, she actually advocates at a federal level among other federal agencies, bringing the resident's voice to that table. And the way that she can get the resident's voice and understand what's going on in the resident experience is by reviewing the NORS data to see the most common complaints, and also to look at the narrative comments that the state ombudsman submits with that data with the annual report that they submit. So Louise can use that to share the resident's story. And a really good example of that is the recent attention to nursing facility initiated discharges. ACL specifically used NORS data because that has been the #1 complaint across the country for 7 years now. to say that this is a major issue and this is what's going on. And then she used some narrative statements as well as, case examples, obviously redacted, to share the residents' experience and how traumatic these discharges can be. And that got CMS's attention. They issued a memo about a discharge initiative and really working with the CMS regional offices and reviewing cases of discharge. And there's been a lot of activity around that. So that's another example. And another one would be that not just at the federal level, but at the state level with state ombudsmen and even at the local level, programs will use their data to talk about what's going on locally or statewide or at the national level. They'll use that in speaking with the press. They'll use that to try to speak with representatives to increase funding and so on. So it's really used in a lot of ways, and that's a great question. And again, welcome to the program. So got another question, and just so you all know, and I hope this didn't happen to anyone else, someone said they were unable to access the audio portion of the webinar. So I'm not sure what happened to that, but if that did happen, you can't even hear me talking about it right now, but the recording will go out, and so hopefully you'll be able to hear the audio then. But just so you know, you registered already for this webinar. You're automatically registered for the November and December ones. And when it sends out your confirmation, there is a phone number. And when you connect, you can join by phone or by computer audio. So that looks to be our last question, and I don't see any in the chat. Maria, is there anything you wanted to just share with those on the call? Or anything that we missed?
So it would be more, and you could still, if people want to respond, they could still put it in the Q&A, but it would be more as a, can you tell us in just a few words how it's going with using the new code? Has having the training available to you helped with the process? Or are you finding it hard? And any, I guess, any lessons learned so far in the gathering of the data or things that you'd like to share with us? So we have one person saying it's definitely easier. Hey, that's good to hear. Thanks for that feedback. Anybody else? Have you had a good experience, or are you having to make some transitions with your data collection? Been a pretty easy crossover process. Good to hear. I don't know if Louise is still on the phone, but we're going to share these with her so that she can have this feedback also. She and we have invested a lot of years in this work, so I think we're pleasantly happy and surprised to hear that it's going fairly well. Absolutely. Really glad to hear this, and we'll make sure to share your comments with her, because as Maria said, it's been years in the making, and not just with Louise and ACL. We've had a lot of time and investment, as she mentioned, from state ombudsmen and program representatives. So thank you all that were part of the process. So I want to go through the last few slides, and thank you for commenting. And don't hesitate, again, like I said, you can continue to send in questions, comments. So, and yes, I see there were just a few more comments. This one's good. Just preparing questions about this new system made me really read all of the material. So that was one of the things that Amity had focused on, which I am so appreciative of now, was that, hey, let's start this as if we're teaching good ombudsman skills right from the beginning and not make assumptions. I know some people felt like it was back to 101, and it was covering the basics, but I'm glad to see that people were inspired to read the materials. Here's someone that says, just getting ready to do my first monthly report. It looks simple, but first time will take some adjustment. That's true. Another one is, all is well for now, just a few technical glitches that we expected. It's always kind of good to know that you're expecting it and knew how to be prepared. Here's somebody that says, I'm new to the Ombudsman program, and it seems pretty straightforward as you are teaching it. Good content and examples, and his thanks. Somebody says, the training has been very helpful. I'm still finding it difficult to find appropriate revised codes. So earlier, Amity had showed on the screen on the NORS site, there's available 2 different types of crosswalks. It's the same information. One is just 1 page, and it's just the brief descriptions of the codes, and the other one is more of a narrative description. I encourage you to look back at those and see if that will help. Somebody wrote, it helps to have access to the cheat sheets. Well, that's what I was just talking about, so I hope you can find those, the person that was still struggling a little bit. And then somebody says, going well, a little transition learning with the new codes, and that's to be expected. I really applaud all of you for doing your detail, making sure that you're reviewing your cases and, you know, coding them as appropriately as possible. And I just applaud you for your effort. Congratulations. Yep. Okay, back to you, Amity.
Yeah, thanks, Maria, for catching those and sharing them. And yeah, I second what you said. It's always a challenge to do something different that you've been doing, a lot of you, for many, many years. So thanks for hanging in there with us in this process. And it's new to us too, even though we've been creating the materials. We still have to look at the materials when we're answering questions. So it's definitely a process, and in a lot of ways we're learning together. In response to the comment about still finding it difficult to find appropriate codes, obviously use those tools that Maria mentioned. Use the crosswalk, use the cheat sheets, use the charts, the ACL table. And also keep in mind that sometimes it really is just finding the best fit. So it's not, some of these may not be perfect, and you may find that one code was discontinued that maybe you used often. Other programs and other ombudsmen may not have used that complaint code often for whatever reason. So that will be an adjustment. So just go with the best fit, and we'll keep learning together. And if you find any issues or errors or something that you feel is missing, again, send that to us and we'll put that on the list for future changes. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move forward. And if we keep having comments come in, then we can get back to them. Thanks, Katie. So here's, next slide, please. So this is just what I shared my screen and showed you, but at least it's in the slide deck too with the URL, so you can get to it quickly if you don't have it already saved as a favorite. Next slide. Was there one before that about the open dialogues? Or did maybe, no, darn. Okay, sorry. That one's in my deck and not the one I sent Katie, so I apologize. But I just wanted to remind everyone that the next webinar, hopefully it's on your calendar. Again, if you've already registered for this one, then you're registered for the whole series. But that one is on November 20th from 3 to 4 Eastern Time, and it's about coding complaints covering part 2. So one of the commenters, those questions that I read that came through email, that was really helpful, by the way, to send your questions in ahead of time. So as y'all prepare for the next open dialogue, if you do have some questions and you have the time, jot them down and email them. You'll see our contact information soon, and send those to us, and then we can have those ready to review during the webinar. So that would be great. If you don't have time to do it, don't worry about it. But if you do, great. And then the last one of the series for the open dialogue ones will be in December 17th, and that's covering part 3 and part 4. So, and then we'll send you, just like we did before this one, a reminder of what to do and what to review before that open dialogue webinar. All right, next slide, Katie. So here is our contact information. Feel free to reach out to any of us. And we also have the just general email address, which I think is on the next slide. Katie, thank you. Nope, it's not on the next slide. But that is ombudscenter@theconsumervoice.org. But you'll find that email address on our website. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and then sign up for our app if you haven't done that already. We designed the app to help provide information to those of you out in the field doing field work in order to help you get access to quick information. So, that is all we have for today. Thank you so much. I know Louise isn't on, but thanks, Louise, for your remarks and for your work on this on NORS. And Maria, thank you for helping with the presentation and responding to questions, and really appreciate your help on this project. And thank you all for joining us today. It was a lot of fun to talk to you this way. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day. Thank you.